and also seeing my father and my uncle both run their own trucking business, it basically encouraged me, it influenced me to and it gave me insight, obviously, to want to do it for myself. What's good, y'all? It's Exclusive here with another trucking video. In this video, I'm going to basically show you what helped me 4 years ago increase and made my learning curve quicker. And, I learned at a quicker pace. Some of the things that took other drivers longer, I learned in a quicker amount of time, even before I had my CDL. Some of the people that end up getting their CDL, when they do it, they don't really have any prior experience. So, they know about the money. They want to do it. They have the passion to do it. They have the dedication. But there's one thing in particular you'll be at a faster learning curve and a faster pace than most drivers starting off. Before I got my CDL, a little backstory on me. My father had a trucking company, a box truck company, a moving company, and I worked for him for years. I did that, and those are obviously smaller trucks, but it taught me a lot as far as just using your mirrors, how to maneuver a truck, backing up. That is, one of the things that helped me, early on before, just knowing the basics of a truck. Obviously, I learned more skills as time went on, but I used to move furniture 7 days a week, especially during the summer days. During the summer times, I would move furniture 7 days a week. So 16, I was doing moving jobs while I was going to school. When I was in high school, I used to do moving jobs. I was making money. My father was my employer. He was my boss. And we would go do moving jobs in DC, Virginia, all over the DMV area. I used to live in Baltimore before I moved to Chicago, Illinois, 6 years ago. But yeah, I did that. And, I did that from the time that I was in high school up until, like 2000, and off and on. It was off and on because I had other jobs in between that. But, from like 2010 on and off and on until about 2019, and it gave me the discipline. It gave me the conditioning, to end up getting my CDL. I feel like if I didn't do that, I wouldn't have gotten my CDL. I feel like this is more so something for me because of how long I've just been in the trucking industry as a whole. Like as a teenager, I've been in the trucking industry since I was a teenager, And so the number one thing I would say that I took from, being a mover is, certain customers, you got to call them on the phone, introduce yourself, let them know, we also had business cards, let them know when we're going to be there, tell them a certain time that we plan to be there, had appointments to move them by a certain time, and customer service, customer psychology. I learned that myself, like just certain things that customers value because they used to tip us. Sometimes I would get $100 tip, $50 tip, $20 tip. They would give us lunch, all types of things. We're moving pianos, refrigerators, washers and dryers and all type of stuff. We moved it. You name it, we moved it. If it's any household item, we moved it. We moved a lot of different people in the DMV area, Baltimore, DC, Virginia. The DMV, obviously, for those of you guys that don't know, is the DC, Maryland, and Virginia. Yeah, deliveries to delivering the furniture, and it was hard work. It was very labor intensive. It was very, I used to be sweating by the time I finished, you know. So I used to get paid every day doing moving jobs for the most part, sometimes every week. Once my father, got more into the business side of things, but we used to get paid pretty much every day. So I did that for I did that for 9 years, and then I ended up moving obviously to Chicago in 2020, um, and I did towing. My uncle had his own towing company, so that's another thing that gave me, conditioning, further confidence, um, and the work ethic to eventually get my CDL. Um, but yeah, the box trucking, the tow trucking. But there's one thing in particular also that I didn't necessarily touch on. I haven't really talked about that in any video, and that is my experience in working in intermodal and railroads. So before I had my CDL, I worked and did. I worked at various rail yards in the Chicago area, and there's different jobs you can do. You can be a crane operator, you can be a groundman. You can work on the ground and unlock the train, unlock the loads when they're coming in to be taken off of the train, and then you have a spotter. It's called different things, but hostler driver, a spotter, um, yard jockey. I mean, there's different things that they call it, but that's one thing that helped me when before I had my CDL, that gave me the confidence to do the maneuvers, because just like parking, what I'm saying, just doing the parking maneuvers. Like I remember when I got my CDL, when I first got my CDL, a lot of the guys, they didn't know how to park, and guys older than me, 40, 50 years old, they wanted me to park because I used to do the team driving. When I did the team driving, obviously going across country to, Washington, Oregon, California, those type of states. Washington State, obviously not Washington D.C., but like when we get to the shipper, they didn't necessarily know how to back up the truck and park, and I knew that automatically because of just maneuvering and doing different maneuvers and stuff like that. I used to do that all the time at the rail yards, and it was a tough job, but I think that's one thing that I would say above all else. One thing is just to make sure that you're conditioned for the work that you do. It's preparation. Conditioning is preparation. Like in football, during the preseason, there's a certain amount of reps that they get, a certain amount of attempts and reps that they do to get them prepared. Is conditioning to get them prepared for the season. So I was already prepared to do this. Like most people don't have the amount of trucking experience that I have, and been in the industry as long as I have. So, I've driven box trucks, I've driven tow trucks. I have that type of experience. I know how to do tow trucks. I mean, just about any type of truck, I can drive it. I've said it in early videos. I said it in I believe I had said that in my first vlog. If you guys watched that from 2023, I reposted it on this channel, but I had a channel before that, and I posted it on there. I reposted it, but basically like just explaining the fact that I was a spotter, just the different type of experience that I've had, and also seeing my father and my uncle both run their own trucking business, it basically encouraged me, it influenced me to, and it gave me insight, obviously, to want to do it for myself. But yeah, so I wanted to say that, and to basically I say that all that to say that I have a lot of experience, and whether you guys are, I mean, just let me know in the comments. I don't know if you guys have ever done any of that type of work. If you guys want towing videos, if you guys want box truck videos, I can do that as well. I know I do a lot of this. This trucking channel was started off as a CDL truck driver because that's what I am currently, but I could also make box truck videos and tow truck videos as well. If you guys want me to explain like how to get a tow trucking job, what tow truck jobs pay the most, stuff like that. How to start a tow truck business, because my uncle had his own tow truck business. How to start a box truck business. How to, get customers, and the things that are important for starting a tow truck business and the things that are important for starting a box truck business. I necessarily didn't have a business, a tow truck or a box truck business myself, but I was living with family members day to day that were running a business in those industries. So, and then obviously, like, I know a lot in business in general. I have different videos explaining different business, uh, basically business models. You know, having a business is more than just having the truck. It's more than just being the best truck driver, like I explained in prior videos. It's more so about the system and the business model that you have that's going to guarantee you the success day in and day out, and sticking to that plan methodically. Methodical approach to the business. Methodical, if I'm saying that right. But anyways, uh, so that's a backstory on me and my story. A lot of people, you guys don't know that, but I figure I'll tell you guys that and explain that. But the main thing that I wanted you guys to take from that is just the conditioning and knowing what it takes to last and to have a sustainable career in the trucking space, conditioning. And if anybody has any questions about becoming a spotter, at a rail yard, I can give you guys pointers on that. I can let you guys know what I did. I started out as a groundman. I worked my way up to a spotter, and I got the experience that gave me the confidence and conditioning to then get my CDL. And I believe that's part of the reason why, like, knock on wood, I haven't had any major accidents, and it's been 4 years. I haven't had any accidents. But with that being said, let me know in the comments if you guys have any thoughts or questions, and I'll answer them in the comments. I'm helpful. If you guys have any questions about any of that type of trucking, other than CDL trucking, any other than semi trucks, I know that as well. So, that's about it for this video. I don't want to make it too long, but stay exclusive, stay safe, peace.